YouTube, and welcome to another episode of Zorg no longer knows what to do, so he will just do requests that he's had over the years, that I have had over the years. Today we will talk about the left-handed elves, a Mer race that we don't often talk about. It's quite likely, the first race of Nern to have gone extinct and have probably the shortest history of them all. That said, before we begin, I have decided to try and keep myself dedicated to an upload schedule from now. So I will either upload on Thursdays or on Tuesdays from now on, depending on the outcome of the community poll that I placed on my channel this afternoon. So that said, place your lore hats directly on your head and then let's talk about some elves. So, the Sinistral Elves, or better known as the Left-Handed Elves, was a race of Mer that lived on the continent of Yakuda during the Mredic era, and presumably also lived during the early First era, but they were not really prominent then. They had their prominence, however, during the Mredic era, when they had a great empire, but we'll come to that. Their origins in itself are pretty hazy, and there's no consensus in the lore community on what the story is and what's the true story. Some people believe that they came from a previous Kalpa, and I really can't explain that very well, so if you're into that sort of thing and into that side of the lore, I recommend checking out my buddy Aramithius' channel and his podcast, as he explains these kind of concepts way better than I ever could. So I will leave a link to his stuff in the description. But there are also people like me that rather believe that the left-handed elves are a product of the evolving elven precursor race, the old Elnofey inhabitants, that eventually got trapped on Yakuda after the Elnofey wars and then evolved into the left-handed elves over the years. And then there's people who believe neither and have their own story. So for neither of these stories there's a lot of in-game info to back it up, so for now let's just try and focus on what we do know, as I cannot tell you with any certainty which story is the truth, as all could be true and all can be false, and then it might just be completely something else. I mean, we just don't know. So, the left-handed elves, or Sinistral elves, was an elven race that lived on Yakuda during the Mredic era. During the early Mredic era they had built an empire for themselves on the land of Yakuda, and it is said that this empire was massive in its scale. We don't know much about how big Yakuda was before the disaster that basically plummeted the entire continent into the ocean, but it can be assumed that the left-handed elves on their high point controlled at least a large portion of the continent. According to unlicensed material, it's even said that their empire spanned an area that was 4 times the size of the Septim Empire at its height, meaning that not only was their empire massive, but Yakuda itself apparently was very massive in size compared to Tamriel. We do not know exactly what the left-handed elves looked like, however we can realistically assume that, like the Yakudans and later the Redguards, they probably had a darker skin than their other cousins on other continents. I assume this because we know that the Aliots, who lived in central Tamriel, also had a slightly darker natural skin color, just like the Imperials that live in central Tamriel, so the same area. This means that skin color, at least to some degree, is in both man and Mer determined by the place where you live and how much exposure you have to, for example, the sun, if that is of course the determining factor in the Elder Scrolls universe. It might be something else, but let's just assume the sun for now, since that's the same in our own universe. So, since the Redguards have a skin that's quite darker on average, and the left-handed elves lived in the same area as the precursors of the Redguards, so the Yakudans, it is quite logical to assume that these elves also had a skin that was a shade darker than average. Other than that, there isn't really much that we can speculate on in terms of their outward appearance, since we simply have never seen any of the left-handed elves and there are no historical records, or at least very little historical records, of what they looked like. As I said before, it said that they had a large empire on Yakuda and that they fared pretty well overall. It said that the left-handed elves built the Olishark Tower, the Great Tower of Yakuda. However, they were not alone on Yakuda. They shared the continents with the Yakudans, who are the precursors of the Redguards, who they were apparently at war with for reportedly 1,000 years during the Mredic era. However, unfortunately for the elves, that war turned on them, as the Yakudans, using Olishark weapons, it exterminated the left-handed elves, until their empire was no more and their culture was eventually lost. We don't know much of what happened during this time in the Mredic era or how this war went, however we do know that the left-handed elves never regained their dominance on Yakuda. Some say that they were completely wiped out and exterminated during this war, while others say that the left-handed elves survived as slaves of the Yokudans and only became extinct once the majority of Yokuda sank into the sea. Perhaps as slaves they were incorporated into the Red Guard or Yokudan societies. If that's true, then on the few islands that still remain of Yokuda, there might have been some people with sinistral elven ancestry. However, if such people exist, we don't really know of it. I find it, however, most likely that those who remained after the genocide were taken in as slaves and then slowly disappeared into the society and slowly getting extinct. I don't know that they interbred much. I don't really think that happened, or even at all with the Yokudans, as it's said that the Yokudans had a great hatred for the Sinistral Elves, and even the Red Guards today apparently don't really wish to talk about them, because they remember the horrors that they inflicted apparently, but that we don't really know about what it was. And actually, they just started to murder the elves when they arrived on Tamriel, because the elves that lived on Tamriel, they reminded the Red Guards of the left-handed elves, so I don't really think it's likely that they interbred with the left-handed elves, since, well, there was apparently a real racial hatred between the two. Whatever exactly happened to the Sinistral Elves is lost to history. Perhaps we will find out in a future game, but I don't really hold my hopes up. That said, if you like this video, consider sticking around for more lore content or watch some of my previous videos, they're all on Elder Scrolls lore. I just wish to thank my patrons who make the fact that I am now able to start following an upload schedule possible, so allow me to make a vocal mention to my top patrons, Hayden Barnes, Sam Campling and Gabriel Binda. You guys are the best. That said, I will see you all in the next video either Thursday or Tuesday, so don't forget to vote in the community tab of the channel on which day the uploads will be from now on. I just wish to say that there will still be extra videos sometimes between those dates, but those are purely extra. It's basically a guarantee that either on Thursday or Tuesday, depending on what you guys vote for, there will be a video basically every week, unless there's like a real emergency or something, but I don't really imagine that. So yeah, see ya!